Good evening, Chelsea fans, and welcome back to a very sombre Chelsea Waves. Have the wheels fallen off after Chelsea set fire to 4 points in back-to-back home fixtures against lower league table opposition Leeds and Burnley? We'll analyse a dismal week for the Blues and all the key talking points around this, with holidays aplenty for Chelsea's underperforming and overpaid squad.
We're also going to preview Sunday's crunch clash against Arsenal at the Emirates with top gooner Michael Boyall. Let's jump into it.
Chelsea won, Burnley won. Groundhog Day as Chelsea spurn yet another opportunity to create a buffer in the race for UCL qualification before the fixture schedule turns on us so heavily. Another red card, another 2 points dropped. George, talk us through it.
It's just not good enough. Actually, headed into this one, I was quite happy with the lineup. Obviously, barring yet more news of another Esteval omission at the last and potentially Malo Gusto shoehorned at left back. But obviously, given Cucurella, it was enforced. But crucially, we had that same core contingent, the spine, if you like, from Leeds, from recent fixtures, from recent promising form, all present. And we started like a train. I mean, opening the scoring just 4 minutes in, it was easy as you like. We saw the most incisive move, once again instigated by that man, Andre Santos, before Moises played an even better pass himself. I mean, that ball through the line, defence splitting to Neto was phenomenal. Neto, rapid, once again, squares it perfectly for Purple Patch Pedro to bundle home. And realistically, the Clarets were sort of all at sea, there for the take in the first 10-15. Very much felt like how many rather than if we were going to win the game. And yet, as has been the case far too often, we decide to inexplicably revert to rondos on the halfway line. I mean, Maresca-esque, foot off the gas, we failed to go for the jugular once again, falling into that very same trap that kind of the football world mocked Arsenal for midweek. And bar sort of the uncharacteristic bluff 1v1 from Cole, we sort of created very little of note. And ultimately, we paid the price. Red card again, Ole, just ridiculous from Fofana, unfathomably fouling in the opposition's half, back to goal, needless. And we paid the price. The inevitable followed with Fleming headed home completely unmarked.
You mentioned his name, George Palmer. He's in a bit of a curious patch of form for Chelsea at the moment, and we've all been quite patient with him. Well, I think he gets back up to speed. His injury problems this season and his issue with his groin is well documented, and I'm never going to hold him accountable for mistakes like a miss against Leeds, which could have obviously secured the win for us. There's a couple of moments in this game where I'm starting to have a few doubts on him in the immediate term and long term, what it means for Chelsea. Obviously, the one-on-one, I don't know what happened there. It was a gilt-edged chance for us to probably put that game to bed. I think he was under the presumption that this was Kyle Walker of old chasing him down and took the shot early, when in reality he had the step ahead of him and could have easily just carried on and dispatched it, but decided to take the ball and the shot easily. But more concerningly, shaking his head, negative body language when he's being subbed off for a defender. Whatever you think of Tosin, his best mate coming on to try and see the game out for us. I'm not sure what Palmer's up to, shaking his head and so demonstrably showing his unhappiness. I think given his particular, trajectory this season, the support from the fans and the patience we've had with him, I just don't like to see it. I don't know what's going on in his head, to be honest. Is he pushing for a move?
I think for some time now, the consistent line's been, look, Cole's very much got credit in the bank. He's been absolutely phenomenal for us for the best part of the last 2 seasons. I actually thought that lead showing, beyond that inexplicable miss at the last, was the first sign of him sort of approaching those previous levels. And I have to confess, when he did, say, get through on goal from that Kyle Walker mistake, yes, fluffing his lines, my sort of overly positive takeaway at the time was, wow, he's burned Kyle Walker there. promising signs? Is he approaching sort of fitness, that extra yard of old? Definitely an element of Kyle Walker's legs going tax, but that was positive for me. But from there on in, particularly in the context of us throwing 2 ridiculous points at home to relegation-bound Burnley, questions do have to be asked. I mean, we joked in the build-up to this game around that Dubai trip, granted that break just as he was building up a head of steam for Leeds. How productive was that trip for Cole and co?
I kind of understood, with this, there's been so few midweeks free of fixtures for Chelsea over the course of this season, coming off a grueling summer schedule with the Club World Cup as well. These opportunities to go and get some sun and decompress slightly are few and far between. So I didn't have any problem with it in principle. I was happy for the players to get a bit of rest and enjoy themselves. But the huge asterisk and the elephant in the room was we had this looming fixture against Burnley, and if you come away from that with anything but a win, you just look utterly ridiculous. And the benefit of hindsight, it now looks misguided, to be honest. I mean, we've seen that compounded with Enzo Fernandez following that Burnley draw. The disappointment there, a really average performance from him, frankly. Pictures of him filtering through on Sunday in the mountains skiing, with his family. Again, players have got to have a life and enjoy themselves and the riches that come with football, but it's just the optics of this deeply unserious Chelsea team, I feel.
I think we were in agreement at the time that potentially that break was needed in the context of the Club World Cup. Admittedly, it was just Burnley with another week's break to follow, but it simply had to be 3 points. I will add to that kind of the asterisk to early tenure Reseña was he's not had time on the training pitch. And ultimately, this week was the perfect time to start to instill his methods. I mean, I mentioned that I was happy with the lineup on paper going into the game. I said at the time, I loved that lead showing. I thought it was a careless, needless 5-minute performance, but I thought we totally dominated, deserved to win that game. But this was a very different story. For me, say on paper, looked great in advance, but it was far too fluid for my liking. I mean, we had Neto deployed on the left, which a litany of evidence suggests he's better on the right, and he even scored a hat-trick against Hull in the 10 role. Perhaps more baffling was Enzo back on the right, kind of eating into Palmer's space, when actually I thought he was pretty handy or better cutting in from the left against Leeds. But I mentioned fluid. I mean, it felt to me almost like an ADHD outing for the players. There were far too many occasions, particularly in that first half, after that first 10 minutes, where players were popping up everywhere, but then vacating flanks entirely. So you had times when the ball was sort of out to the left, out to the right, and Neto had flipped wings and Palmer hadn't covered across or Enzo hadn't moved across. It was kind of all over the place for me and sort of fed into this casual feel. I mentioned players doing rondos back in the centre circle, just no urgency. And as I say, it's something that's going to have to change with that fixture swing.
And Liam Rosenior, post-match in his press conference with the gloves off, calling out unknown centre-back or midfielder for not picking up Zian Fleming for that corner, and which ultimately resulted in the equaliser there. I'm not quite sure who he's referring to, but there was a litany of players in the Chelsea blue not picking up a man, in the 91st minute, particularly their sole number 9 target man, just utterly naive. What did you think of Liam Rosenior's changes towards the end of that match? Obviously, we reshuffled the pack and basically withdrew our attacking threat from the game and brought on, I think it was Sarr, Achiampong and Tosin. Yeah, 3 centre-backs coming on at the expense of strikers, and they couldn't do their job, defending from a corner.
I mean, starting with the incident, the goal in isolation, I mean, there's been criticism around the wording from Reseña, the talk of assignments, sort of PE teacher vibes. But I just found it remarkable that you've brought on 2 6'3", 6'4" centre-backs, in addition to Tosin, who had been brought on earlier, with Chalobah. So we're looking at 4 lads 6'3" and above. Add the lap into the mix there. And yet there were 3 back to back to back unmarked headers. I think the first warning sign was offside. The second one was the goal. And then the third should have been the winner for Burnley. And I just think it's ridiculous. You brought on your giraffes to defend this exact moment. Nothing more in my mind that a manager can do then. And just none of the players taking accountability and attacking the ball. In terms of the changes in general, as I say, bringing on Tosin on 70, I do understand the need there. I think we've far too familiar with the 10v11 setup, but we have complained in the past that you've got to leave pace, that outlet, that threat on the break. And I do agree, ultimately, those 20-25 minutes, I'm not sure we threatened that Burnley goal once. I think any top side worth their salt threatens and probably gets that second goal, well aware that odds are 10 men are likely to score against us, particularly 10 men who seem incapable of defending set pieces.
And George, in the hunt for Champions League, last 2 games has clearly done significant damage for Chelsea's prospects. The fixture gods are very quickly turning on Chelsea now, with 2 away fixtures in a matter of days coming, away to Arsenal and Aston Villa, first and third in the Premier League, followed by, I think it's a series of fixtures such as Newcastle, Brighton away, and United and City at home. So do you think that's probably it for Chelsea in our pursuit of Champions League football? Do you think we tend to thrive under the pressure slightly better and on the bigger stage of these kind of fixtures than your likes of Leeds and Burnley, where we've seen complacency kick in?
I mean, we never seem to do it the easy way, do we, at Chelsea? I'd be inclined to agree that, as Merson sort of stated adamantly, failure to win those 2 plum fixtures, we're probably outside favourites for that top 5 berth. I mean, you saw those just ridiculous late winners. I mean, particularly the Liverpool one. United, we've called for some time, odds on for a place in the top 4, top 5, given their squad, given their lack of other competitions. I think we're almost in a position where we're preying on Aston Villa's downfall. So not long ago, I was sort of half-heartedly hoping that they'd be in the title mix. I think realistically, our best / only remaining hope of qualification is for them to slide down the table. Deja vu.
Ultimately what happened last year, wasn't it? Yeah, they ultimately didn't have the squad to sustain a top 4 bid for the entirety of the season and fell apart on the last day at Old Trafford. So definitely going to need something similar. That game obviously on the horizon. I think that is a chance for Chelsea to stake a claim and eat into that 6-point lead. I think it's 6 points that Villa have got over us. Yeah, it's troubling times ahead, I think.
Time to stand up and be counted.
George, we've spoken at length about the strategy of Chelsea's ownership, largely a pair of football novices at Clearlake and Boehly as well, who've tried to reinvent the wheel on the job and tried radical new things for two men, Eghbali and Boehly, who are very new to football. One aspect of that is obviously the youth focus and experiment and manufacturing this scenario where we only sign seemingly under 23 footballers. Another feature is obviously the lengthy 8, 9, 10-year contracts, which we've debated before and in theory lock down quality players, but on the flip side, you're stuck with underperforming ones, and appreciate the amortization loophole within this as well. I want to get your view on how these long-term contracts are affecting not the financial outlook of the club, but rather the mindset of the players receiving them.
2 quite ridiculous stats stand out this past week for me. You've got Chelsea league high 19 points drop from winning positions. And beyond that, you've seen failure from Chelsea to beat all 3 promoted sides at the bridge. And I slightly abstractly do blame this curse of the long-term contract. So as you've touched upon, and for all the talk of financial loopholes, Clearlake really chuffed with themselves as industry disruptors. We believe they've reinvented the wheel, but I think crucially, they have set a culture of prioritizing tomorrow over today. And I think the complacency that it breeds simply cannot be understated. So, I mean, looking back at this Burnley game most recently, you've got players smiling post pivotal red cards. You've got no look passes with the game still finally in the balance. Beyond that fixture alone, you've got match day squad absences at the last hour. You've got selection based on asset value preservation or morale rather than merit. We're talking here about a climate with zero accountability. You've basically got a crop of players, many of which are sort of young, early in their careers, who have already secured generational wealth, irrespective of their performance on the pitch. And for some, being, I guess, seemingly completely content off it on the stretcher, in hospital, whatever you want to call it. Ultimately, I think peak performance is earned at the margins, discipline, determination in the face of jeopardy. Our overarching goal now for the remainder of the season is Champions League places. But realistically, failure to make Champions League, which we've discussed as increasingly likely, what jeopardy is there for the players, sporting directors alike? I mean, even the manager, Rosenia, yes, he may lose his job, but ultimately, due to these ridiculous contracts, he's still sat pretty cozy with an exorbitant payout as his worst case scenario.
And George, there's a whole host of players right now on Chelsea's books on 8, 9, 10-year contracts. I think I saw the old announcement post from Fabrizio Romano. Alejandro Garnacho is on a 10-year contract at Chelsea. And I think he's one of a handful of players that just epitomizes the complacency and the casual nature that emanates from these terms. I think Malo Gusto strikes me as a player that's not particularly under pressure, not pushing himself to step it up and to apply himself on all different occasions, not just big games where he has a history of stepping up for Chelsea. Wesley Fofana, laughing his head off as he walked off with a red card the other day. I think we've just found ourselves in a situation now where we are inundated in players who, as you put it, have secured this generational wealth. They're chilling, they're living the life in London, and their priorities are not on footballing, self-advancement, and the betterment of the club. I think it's a real predicament we're in. I don't know about the financial implications and amortization. I know there were short-term benefits to that, and the Premier League or the FA, Premier League have sort of since then changed the rules to close that avenue for clubs. But in terms of the players now that we're stuck with, I think it's a real predicament for us.
I think Malo Gusto is a phenomenal example. I'm not sure I've ever seen a player go from a 9, 10 out of 10 showing to a 4, 5 so consistently. This is a guy, say, still very young, incredible quality, physical attributes, technical ability, but just so painstakingly casual, so sloppy. And I would argue he's your classic case study whereby in the right environment with a top coach, with jeopardy, with the need for discipline, you're potentially looking at a really, really top player there. But you can be no confidence that he's going to fulfill that. I think I touched upon it as well. I mean, the lads on the injury table. So you've had Fofana for a sustained period. I think Lavia is the obvious one. I myself have been afflicted with injury issues for a while, but say I've not had a world-class medical team around me. You do question not only the individual player, whether there's that desire there, but also potentially that cautious mentality from player and club alike with the obsession of asset preservation, those long-term contracts, the sort of onus on not crippling an individual realistically is going to deprive you from kind of the hard yards pushing over the line. I mean, that video of Roy Keane absolutely hammering a leg press in the gym. Yes, clearly that's suboptimal. Clearly medical science has moved on. But equally, when you're sort of permanently questioning whether you're in the red zone, it does start to feed into the psyche. I mean, Esteval, another example, how many times has he suddenly been out the matchday squad? Yes, there's been examples of personal family issues, can't account for those. But this latest, a slight hamstring scare, I'd love to see an alternate universe in another side, competing side. I believe every chance he probably gets through a 90 is a non-starter. So I say I'm torn. You don't want to see those top players crippled, but ultimately you're favouring tomorrow over today. I mean, you coined it perfectly with Esteval. He seems to permanently be one game away from performing to the top level. I almost think at this rate, we're only going to see a handful of performances before that undoubted, inevitable transfer request to Real Madrid comes knocking. Every chance him not having even won us any major honours by then at this rate.
Slight side topic, George, and put you on the spot here. I want a line on who you think the Chelsea indispensables are in this squad, because it actually feels easier to list the players that I would keep rather than those I wouldn't. So let me know if you agree with this and if I've missed anyone off. Cucurella, Caicedo, Esteval, James, Sanchez, Palmer, Joao Pedro, Pedro Neto.
So I was convinced that you were going to omit Cole Palmer there, given that kind of initial discussion around transfer elsewhere. I'd love to know, sadly, where the board's head's at with all of this talk of contract value, etc. It does feel like a major sale is on the horizon. Will that be an Esteval, a Cole? Will it be an Enzo, etc.? But I think I'd largely agree with that crop you selected. And actually, I would say that critical mass of players has increased. I think one of the positives in recent times is is a bit more of a spine emerging in our side, which we're starting to see. But yeah, that spine's definitely going to have to carry us going forward. Time now for the opposition view. Up next for the Blues is a trip to the Emirates. Feels like we've played Arsenal sort of every other game these past few weeks. But joining us to preview this one, we've got friend of the pod and top gooner, Michael Boyall. Welcome, mate.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me on. Very excited to talk through this big game.
Bet you are. Right, let's get straight into it. So what is the kind of current feeling around the club? Confident for a title race, quad even?
Well, I know we've been speaking the last few weeks, and you were pretty confident about Arsenal's chances. I've always felt this is going to go right to the wire, and I don't think that's changed. That result with Wolves sent everyone into a bit of a tailspin. I couldn't make that particular game. I was abroad, but the group of friends that I usually go with, they said that was about as angry as they've seen Arsenal fans in a number of years, probably since the Wenger days. Some old scars have been opened up with that result, but thank God for Tottenham, I guess.
I have to say, I think the Spurs game is the perfect elixir to reignite that title charge post that Wolves hiccup. I think a lot of the football world, or particularly the Chelsea bubble that I'm in, got quite excited watching that, particularly sort of the lack of ideas in attack. I wouldn't say bottle, but definitely letting a subpar Wolves side grow into the game. And I mean, it's exactly what we did just a few days later against Burnley. But I did think / fear that potentially that Gyökeres performance, him coming into form, could be that cutting edge, that little bit of boost that you guys need towards the end of the season. Do you agree, or is that just Spurs tax playing out there?
I think definitely some Spurs tax. They really came onto us and pressed us high, and it played completely into our hands. Our midfield and forwards had a lot more space than we do in usual games when we're playing against deep blocks. But I do think there's something there for Gyökeres. He's definitely looked a lot better with either Eze or Havertz next to him rather than Odegaard. Arteta's biggest job on his hands, in my opinion, for the next couple of months is working out his striker and number 10 combination, how they can play off each other. Gyökeres isn't a guy that you can just leave on his own up top. He hasn't got the technical skills. He's not going to make chances for himself. He needs someone near him, someone like Eze. And I think that Gyökeres goal just after half time to give us the lead on the weekend was a great example of that. The ball came across from Timber. Eze was right next to him. During Radican, Gyökeres had time to have a touch and blast it home, because he's a sort of player that if you give him time and space, he's a clean striker of the ball. He'll put it away. But if your defenders do get tight to him, don't give him space. He's a big guy, but he's not the most useful with it. So he needs other players around him to unlock his attributes. And if Arteta's worked that out, and if Eze's come into enough form that we can actually trust him in these sort of games, I think that's probably our best combination moving forward. So yeah, I think it'll be the same again on the weekend, and we'll see how we go.
So running back with the same 11, we think, for you guys. You mentioned Spurs' high press approach. Like everything Bluco have sort of attempted to stand for, Rosenior himself, is playing with the ball, pressing high, etc. But I was there for that slightly odd second leg cup tie in the Carabao. Are you expecting more of the same from Chelsea there? So I think we went to a back three for the first time. Despite needing to chase the game and win, we ultimately did play to kind of keep it tight and frustrate you guys. Are you sort of expecting similar? And could that prove problematic, do you think, for you guys in this fixture?
Yeah, I am expecting the same. It's what I would do in Rosenior's position. I think Arsenal's weaknesses against strong mid blocks that again get into very, very tight, deep blocks. It's pretty obvious. It's where we struggle the most. We've had such fun in Europe and scored so many goals just because teams seem unwilling to do that against us. Whereas the Premier League, there's more of an acceptance that if you do try to go just completely toe for toe, you'll likely come off worse. I thought Rosenior's game plan worked pretty well in that second leg. It was obviously slightly defensive when, it is almost a risky plan in some sense, because when it doesn't come off, it looks super defensive and negative. But I think, as Wolves showed on the weekend, they kind of had a similar-ish plan. If you just hang around against, I think, what is probably, you'd agree, slightly superior team at this point, you have a better shot than going out gun-ho from the start, trying to turn into a basketball game, box to box, give players like Saka one-on-one space against the fullbacks, giving Eze space around the box. I think that approach wouldn't work for Chelsea in this game. And I think you've got the players to do it. That midfield is super physical. I am slightly worried for this game. I think if Rosenior does get it right, it could be a really sort of nip and tuck affair.
You say we've got the players, so I'd agree on the midfield front, but Wesley Fofana ridiculously got sent off at the weekend. So I think we're pretty confident Chalobah is going to start, but it's a total lottery as to who he's paired with, / if you think it's a back three. Is it going to be two unknowns in there? I think Chelsea fans, anything but tossing seems to be our kind of thinking, but then you're potentially throwing in a 20-year-old Sarr who's not played a Premier League or has not started a Premier League game yet. So remains to be seen there. Kai Havertz, we have to bring him up. Is he going to be back fit in contention for that one?
Well, it's the classic case of whatever Arteta says, probably think the opposite. Because he said he was touch and go for the North London derby. I don't think that was true. I don't think he'll feature this weekend. But trying to predict this sort of stuff with Arteta is very hard. He gives absolutely nothing away in press conferences. A lot of cloak and dagger comments. So really hard to tell. I don't think he'll start. Definitely not. I think Gyökeres will 100% start. There's no reason to. For once, it's a very rare occasion, but we have a free week, no midweek game, so we have a full 7 days rest. He'll go absolutely full strength. And the informed team, which is, I think, the one that played on the weekend.
I think it's fair to say Chelsea fans will be hopeful that he's not in the matchday squad for that one. I'm interested / happy to hear that you do, or I'm inferring that you do see this as a key remaining hurdle, a tough fixture. I mean, I was looking, we've discussed, I think we've now failed to beat Arsenal in 10 competitive fixtures. Yeah. So Arteta's definitely had our number, much like we've had joy against Spurs. I mean, you have the same joy against Spurs. It's definitely a bit of a hoodoo there, but you do see this as a kind of key hurdle to overcome in the running?
100%. I was looking at the fixture list just before we got on, and I'd say probably this is our second hardest game. There's obviously the City away one that's just looming large. But after that, we've got a pretty kind run in, all things considered. And I say this is probably our hardest game. There's a couple of games. Newcastle home will be tricky because they always Eddie Howe has a good approach against this Arsenal team. But apart from that, they're all games we should bear the opposition. The issue with Arsenal has been that they struggle in those sort of games, sometimes more than the big games because they can't seem to motivate themselves. I think this Arsenal team will be fully motivated this weekend. This is the sort of fixture where I have a decent degree of trust in this team to be up for it, especially with the free week. I think that's a huge factor. We've barely had any free weeks in the last 2 or 3 months. So Arteta's kind of had to slice and dice the team a bit. I think players like Timber have looked particularly leggy recently. He needs those 7 days rest, especially. So I'm expecting us to come out flying in this game, and hopefully, from an Arsenal perspective only, get the win.
Not that I'm confident, but for what it's worth, I do actually think Chelsea have to take something here, kind of steer that title away from Arsenal. City look far from convincing against Newcastle. Ultimately, they did get it done. And yes, they do have that fixture at the Etihad, but I agree with your assessment that your fixtures are favourable. And I think back-to-back London derby wins would kind of be that recharge post that Wolves hiccup to send you guys on your way. Let's get into it then. Predictions for this one. Let's have a final score.
I've gone 2-1 Arsenal. We picked up a very unuseful habit in giving away stupid goals recently. At the start of the season, it looked like teams really couldn't score against us at all. But now we're finding new ways to concede goals every week. It seems Rice giving away really uncharacteristically on the weekend, the Raya Gabriel mistake. So I do think you're going to get a goal. I think we'll just edge it out when it comes to it, but I'm not expecting sort of a demolition job by any means. Even with your issues at the back, I think we've seen we'll set up pretty not defensively, but compactly, and won't let us transition to big spaces. So it's going to come down to a few moments, and I think we'll probably just edge it. But I'd be interested to hear how you see it as well.
I'm going to go positive. I'm going to call on the squad, let's say, to amend for those recent slip-ups and to take the positives that we agree on from that second leg Carabao tie. I'm hoping there won't be obviously that onus on us to chase the game right at the end. So I'm going to call a 1-1 draw. So I'm going to call on João Pedro to continue his strong run and Arsenal to kind of pile on the pressure, get one, but I'm hoping not all 3 points. Enjoy the game, mate. I'm sure.
Thank you.
We'll have a beer beforehand or after.
Yeah, sounds good. After your fantastic hospitality in the reverse fixture.
I have to ask you, mate. I ask everyone on the show, what are your thoughts on the circus that is Chelsea FC?
Well, it's a really interesting situation at Chelsea. I think your lack of discipline this season has been super interesting. I think realistically, it's probably unsurprising given the youth of the team. I think it does lack some clear leaders. But I think you do have some really good players there as well. That if Rossini can somehow pull it together, there's a good team in the offing. If I was going to be critical, is that really even what the Chelsea board and ownership group want, or do they care more about being the player trading club? I think I said to you, I can see the idea of Cole Palmer going back to Manchester United if the money's right, especially if United make the Champions League. They'll want to make a statement signing, and I think if something like that happens, you guys could turn pretty quickly. So overall, hard to call at this point. It's relatively early on in the project for this ownership group, but the early signs aren't positive.
So we've actually discussed as kind of the theme for this show, the long-term contracts, ulterior motives, and ultimately the culture set at the club, permeating into all aspects and ultimately ending up in subpar performances. And it pains me to say it, love to mock Mikel Arteta, but from the get-go, culture is his champion word in all things he does. It's consistently the element he places most emphasis on, insisting that the results will follow. And fair play to him. It does look to be heading in the right direction eventually, but I'm hoping ultimately it falls short.
Well, it could well do. I think we're at a really interesting point in the Arsenal project as well. It's kind of you have to win territory. Arteta's done a fantastic job so far, but is there something with him where he can't quite get a team over the line? We're going to find out in the next 10 games. I'm hopeful, but extremely nervous. And I would say if Chelsea do get an early goal somehow in the first half, that Arsenal crowd will get nervous. It can turn into a bit of a nervous wreck at the Emirates occasionally. So game script is going to be huge this weekend. If Arsenal get an early one, the crowd will really pile on the pressure. They'll get bang up for it, try and intimidate the referee as much as possible. If it goes the other way, it could get very nervy.
We will see.